Hey guys, this box just showed up this afternoon, and assuming the contents survived intact, this could solve the problems I'm having with two of my TVs. I'll pop it open and find out. So far so good. This is the control panel, including spring-loaded door for an Admiral TV. I'm hoping this will fit on my 16-inch Admiral 26x56 I picked up a couple months ago. If you recall, in that video the door was broken off. And this should be a 16GP4 metal CRT, which is what's in that Admiral set. But what I really want it for is my Zenith porthole set, which takes a 16EP4, which are next to impossible, if not impossible to find. This, I think, will work, maybe with slight modifications. It's a little bit shorter, but we'll see. Regardless, if it doesn't work in the Zenith, I can certainly use it in the Admiral. The CRT in that set is fair. I was told this one tests really strong. Now, these are not easy to ship, as you might imagine. So, the guy I got this from had to go to great lengths to build a custom enclosure here to protect the neck and so on. And some nice padding down at the bottom, so let's keep our fingers crossed and hope this survived unbroken. Alright, it does appear to be alright. So here's the gap in this insulating collar. It comes off, and then you can separate the picture tube from the safety glass. And this little button over here, that's the high voltage connection. That goes underneath the shroud and then goes right to this surface, because this entire tube from here down is metal, so this entire cone is at the full potential voltage of, I think about 14,000 on this particular tube. So, not something you want to come anywhere near. I wouldn't trust this plastic, which is, I doubt even a 32nd of an inch thick. It's not going to offer a whole lot of protection. And looks pretty good in the front. Sturdy, but you know, with all that high voltage, it will attract a lot of dust. Otherwise, it looks to be in good shape. So you know what comes next. I'm going to pull out the picture tube tester and see what kind of emissions I get. I pulled out my trusty B&K 440, got it all hooked up, so here we go. Remember, these two should light up as half moons if it's a good picture tube and there aren't any shorts. There goes G1, and there goes G2. And the fact that they lit up so quickly is a really good sign. So let's jump over to emissions. Alright. I'm still climbing and climbing. Awesome. And the last check is cut off. When you move this knob, the needle should move, and you should be able to get over to that red line, and that works just fine. So that's fantastic. So the last challenge will be to see what kind of physical modifications I might have to make to the Zenith to get this to fit. They have different deflection angles. I think the 16EP4 is 60 degrees and this is 70 degrees, or vice versa. What that means is basically this angle of when the electron beam comes out of this gun and it deflects over. So this is the shorter of the two, which I guess means this has the sharper deflection angle. So two issues. One is that this neck is physically a bit shorter, so there may be some physical impediments to this, because you do have to put a focus coil around here and an ion trap magnet, and if this isn't long enough, they might bump into this cap or some other metal support structures. And two, the deflection angle is different. So let's see, I'm trying to think in my head. If this is shorter and it's wider, and the other tube was meant for one that's more acute, the picture is either going to go off the edge by a certain amount, or it's going to be shrunk in too much. I'm hoping with the various horizontal width and vertical height and so on, by adjusting those, it shouldn't be a problem. If it is, I could try swapping out the yoke, or I've even heard it's possible to heat up the yoke and deform it a bit. They're made up of lots of turns of enameled copper wire held together with a lacquer or enamel type substance, and yeah, that you can mush them a bit, you know, physically distort them. So, but I won't worry about that till I get the whole set working. Now, as for that control panel, sorry, it's nighttime and a bit dark out here, but how about that? Sure looks like it's going to fit to me. I also asked for the knobs, but he couldn't find them. The ones I've got are serviceable. The other one has a slight crack in the base. I've got it up on my workbench. I'm going to glue that up. So here's how the door works. Minor detail for sure, but I think it looks a lot nicer to have it than to just have all those controls exposed like that. Here's something else I picked up recently. From the outside it just looks like a notebook some kid has doodled all over. But inside, what this actually has is the original Philco service info for all of their radios from the start of the company in 28 through 1937. So this covers most of the Philcos I've got, like my Philco 15DX and my Philco 60, Philco 70, 643, 3710, and so on. For example, here's that Philco 15DX. What's so nice about these is that they're very easy to read. You can get all of these for free from a website called Nostalgia Air, but those scans are low res, and generally it's impossible to read these parts lists, but this is very, very legible. So you got all the parts lists here, you got the component locating diagram, and then of course the schematic. What's also cool is in the back there's something that you don't normally get when you get scans from other sources, which is this. This is a voltage chart for every radio. So they list each of the tubes in the radio and what the voltages should be if you measure it, for example, the screen grid, the control grid, the cathode, and so on. So when you're troubleshooting a radio, you can get out your voltmeter and check all these voltages and compare them to this chart. Usually the schematics do not list the voltages. Unfortunately, I do have some Philcos that are from 38 and one from 39, which are not covered in here because it ends with about the 37660. But I was able to find those on eBay. Paid a bit, I think like $10 for each of these, which is a bit steep, but they don't come up that often. So here it is for the 38.7. I have the 38.7 share side. And again, nice and big and easy to read. And this is for the 3930, a little slant radio I've got. So with this info in hand, it should be a lot easier to work on those radios. Recently I also saw a posting on Craigslist about an estate sale for someone who had worked on Zenith TVs, and I went over and took a look, and most of the stuff they had was later than I was interested. It was stuff in the 60s and 70s, except for these soldering irons. They caught my eye. Every now and then I need to do a major soldering job. For example, on this Motorola, when I put this side panel back on, I have to solder this heavy braid right to the steel plate. No, I managed to get it off using a soldering gun, but it was tough. See, even though a soldering gun like this, it's 200/260 watts. 260 watts is a heck of a lot more than this soldering iron. But the reality is, there isn't much what they call thermal mass to these. The part that gets really hot is just this little bit of metal up here at the tip. And as soon as you press that tip up against like an entire metal chassis, it acts like a huge heat sink and cools the tip right down. And you have a very hard time soldering like this big solder blob right here. But these guys, these are classic American-made soldering irons. Like this is made by a company called American Beauty, I believe. Yeah. And even though this is only rated for 100 watts, which is half or less than what that is, this will do a much better job on the chassis, because once this heats up, you got a huge hunk of metal here at the high temperature, and when you put this up to the metal, this will do a much better job of keeping that spot hot. And this guy is actually 225 watts, so this should do an even better job. These are heavy and a little scary to use because you get this, you know, a couple pounds of metal that's going to be very, very hot, and you can't put it in a little stand like this; it will just fall over. So I'll have to make up some kind of metal holder for these and be careful when I use them. But I thought that was kind of a cool thing to grab. Oh, and what's below these is my order came in for the last few parts I needed to finish off. These two Motorola's on my bench, including the inductors that had burned out on this guy, so it is finally time to finish these two chassis off. I'll save those chassis for another dedicated video. So to close this video out, here's one more look at the 16GP4 CRT. I spent some time and cleaned it all up, and I only found two very minor defects in the phosphor. There's one there, you guys probably can't even see it. So I think this is going to work out just fine, at least electrically. Still have to figure out about how it's going to mount physically. But from what I've read online, it's been fairly encouraging, so I think I'll be able to manage it. That's all for now.